127 Hours is a true story that begins with Aaron, who is preparing for a camping trip in a desert area. He starts packing at home, gathering the necessary items and supplies to survive in the desert. He sets off in his car on April 25, 2003, carrying a video camera to record every moment of his trip. Throughout his journey, he talks in the recordings about his trip to the rugged lands and narrow valleys. He continues driving until he reaches the campsite in the desert, where he spends the night sleeping in his car. The next morning, he rides his bike and begins exploring the desert canyons, using the camera to record his journey. He talks about his expectation of reaching Blue John in record time, even though the books indicate that the journey may take 4.5 hours. On his way, he meets two lost girls, Megan and Christy, and decides to help them reach the dome. As they walk together, Aaron shows his knowledge of a shortcut and leads them to a narrow passage between the rocks. He jokes with the girls by pretending to fall, which makes them tremble, but they discover it was just a prank. Afterwards, the three enjoy their time in a natural lake between the rocks and agree to meet again at a future party. On his way back, Aaron continues walking through the narrow valleys and films his journey with his camera. He reaches a high area and decides to descend, but while doing so, the movement of a large rock causes him to fall, and his arm gets trapped under it. Despite his multiple attempts to free his arm, all of them fail. Over time, Aaron realizes that his situation is becoming more dangerous, as his water runs out and he remains trapped for several hours. He uses his simple tools in an attempt to break the rock, but he remains unable. As time passes, his thirst and fatigue increase. He begins recording a message to himself on the camera, recounting his tragedy and trying to use everything he has to survive.
The situation continues like this until midnight, when he begins to feel very tired and cold. He remembers warm times he spent with his father when he was young. He continues recording messages for his family, admitting that he may have to leave his arm behind to survive. Aaron is hungry and believes he has the last piece of pad 8 in his bag. He hallucinates, imagining himself at the party to which he was invited by Christy, which he was supposed to attend at the same time he is in now. Aaron feels distressed because he is still consuming the water from his few bottles, and he has only a little left. He removes his contact lenses and keeps them in his mouth, remembering how he used to wear them while talking to his mother, who was calling him, without realizing that it would be the last time he would hear her voice. Aaron carries a map that reminds him of a time when he was filming it, when Sammy, his manager at work, was beside him. When Sammy asked him where he was going, he replied that he did not know. Aaron wishes that Sammy had come to rescue him in time. Aaron continues to sleep and wake up because of the ants that crawl on him, and he feels thirsty and wants to drink something cold. The drink he left in the car becomes a dream for him, and he thinks of it as if it were a heavenly drink. After drinking a single drop of water from the bottle, he turns on the camera and records the events of the third day, explaining that he needs 8 men to move the rock that is preventing him from leaving. He says that he has only a little water left, enough for 1 day at most, and that he has soiled his clothes while relieving himself, and that his body has begun to adapt to the situation, so much so that he has begun using a storage bag for waste so that he can use it later. Aaron notices that there is a raven that passes by every day at 8:17, and that the sun reaches him for about 50 minutes when it is 9 o'clock. He mentions that his arm is supporting the rock and has become part of it.
Aaron decides that the only solution is to cut off his arm so that he can get out. So he ties the rope around his arm to stop the blood flow and tries to cut off his arm with the scissors, but the scissors are blunt and his attempt fails. Aaron says in the camera that he forgot the Swiss Army knife in the car and that the Chinese scissors are the only ones available, and advises those who watch the recording not to buy cheap things from China because they will not be useful in difficult times. Aaron becomes in a state of deep depression and feels very sad when the water bottle falls from him. He remembers his ex-girlfriend, Rana, and remembers how they met and their relationship began. Aaron wakes up because of the sound of thunder, and the rain begins to fall heavily, and he feels very happy when he touches the water. But the situation quickly turns into a disaster, as he is flooded with torrential water, but he is able to move the rock thanks to the water, which finally allows him to free his arm. He exits the gap and gets into his car, and goes to Rana's house, but he cannot communicate with her and she does not hear him, so she enters her house and discovers that he is crying in his dream. We discover in the end that Aaron is still stuck between the rocks, and the third day has passed and he has entered the fourth day. He talks in front of the camera, and imagines himself in a television interview, and apologizes to his mother for not answering her last call, and expresses his regret for not telling anyone his location. He explains how much he loves his family, and while he finishes the recording, he drinks the last drop of water in his bottle. He finally decides to stick the scissors into his arm, and presses on it to break the bone, but he cannot, and he puts his tongue in the place of the blood because he feels hungry and thirsty. The fifth day comes, and Aaron is forced to drink the urine that he stored in the storage bag, and he tries to continue digging the rock with the scissors he has, and smiles despite the strange events that he is going through, and remembers the day he separated from Raina, and feels sad as he sees his family sitting on the dome. watching him in silence, and apologizes to his sister because he is unable to stay alive to witness her joy, and continues to blame himself for everything that is happening, and he is under a mental breakdown. He says that the rock that imprisoned his arm was there before he was born, and it was waiting for the moment that would make his life hell. The camera he is using cuts off, and a herd of wild horses appears, running over him, filling the place with dust. Aaron begins to sing, and imagines himself as a father looking at his unborn son, filled with tears as he looks at a son who has not yet come. He gathers all his strength to break his arm, and cuts it piece by piece, and loses a large amount of blood, but seeing his son makes Aaron determined to continue, and he must be an example of determination and endurance in front of his son. Aaron continues to cut off his arm, until it is completely finished, after 127 hours of torment. He ties the arm with a rope to reduce blood loss, and wraps it in the plastic bags he has. He moves away from the rock, and photographs it with the second camera intended for photos, and looks up to the sky as if he is talking to his Lord, and thanks him for freeing him from the torment. He finally exits the gap and watches the valley from his high position on a huge hill, and notices a small lake. He discovers on the surrounding rocks the nails that were previously hammered, so he is happy, and kisses them gratefully. He hangs the rope he has on the nails, and descends to the lake, and drinks the largest amount of water in his life. After that he moves through the rocky valleys, and continues walking despite falling, without losing hope, until he finds a group of people on an expedition. He calls out to them, but he does not have enough energy to speak, so he signals for help. He continues his adventures and climbs the mountains, and avoids the mistake of not telling his family his location, after learning from his previous experiences. And you, dear viewer, do not move from your place without securing yourself well, and calculating all the possibilities. In the end, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell button to receive all new updates.